Yeah, we're now live, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Transformation and Improvement Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I think before we start, we perhaps ought to go around the table so that we can, everyone who's listening can hear who's actually in the room. So if I go from my left.
Hi, I'm Tom Dodson, the Scrutiny Manager.
Councillor Robert Macy, Portfolio Holder for Culture and Digital.
Sandy Bagley, Chief Exec, Shropshire Council.
Jez Walton, Executive Director of Resources.
Cecilia Lockley, Portfolio Holder for Adult Social Care, Public Health and Communities.
Afternoon all, Tony Hall, people. Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight, Portfolio Holder for Children and Education.
Councillor Julian Dean, Leader of the Green Group, who's observing.
Julie Buckley, Leader of the Labour Group, and I represent Bridge North and Bridge North West and Tasley. Be too long.
Roger Evans, Leader of the Liberal Democrat Group and representing London Division.
David Vasmer, Councillor for Underdale.
Very voted Councillor for Meal, observing today.
Tim Ward, Committee Officer.
Alan Mosley, that's business Shropshire Council. For Casterbridge and Derrington.
Hi, Helen Watkinson, Head of Improvement.
Councillor Gwynne Butler, Portfolio Holder for Finance and Corporate Resources, Clibberry Morton.
Dan Thomas, Councillor for Muchwell.
Leslie Picton, Leader of Shropshire Council, observing.
Councillor Rob Ferguson's member for Chesmondine.
Tom Biggins, Member for Whitchurch North Division.
Joyce Barrow, Chair of Environment and Economy Scrutiny.
Roy Allcroft, Councillor for Market Road East, substituting today.
Thank you. So, Benjay, would you like to introduce yourself? Benjay is actually joining us remotely.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Ben Jay, Assistant Director for Finance and Technology and Deputy to James as 151.
Okay, thank you. So before we start, I need to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. So we have one apology for absence, that's Councillor Peggy Mullock, and we have Councillor Roy Allcroft who's substituting for her. Pardon?
Sorry, I heard again.
Item number 2 are disclosable pecuniary interests. Has anybody got any interests they'd like to declare? Minutes of the previous meeting. I'll move them.
I'll second.
Everyone happy?
Yeah.
Yep. Public questions, there are none. Member questions, there are none. Item number 6 is the Financial Monitoring Report Quarter 1 for the period 23-24. Before we start, I want to say a few words. Firstly, a big thank you to James and his team and also to Gwilym because we've actually got all these reports a lot quicker than we normally do. And also a thank you to the leader in conjunction with Gwilym, who's allowed us to take this before it goes to Cabinet next week. And also, this week. And also, we've changed things around a little bit. We have quite a few Cabinet members here today, as those listening will have heard. And we've also got the Chief Exec here, who will be coming to all the future meetings where we do the quarterly reporting. So, James, if I can pass over to you to begin with, if you like.
Yeah.
I'll just say a few words before we actually start.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so as said, this is the Quarter 1 financial monitor. So this year is quite a different year to previous ones in terms of the way that we're managing our financial position and the information that we're trying to pull together and provide out to the organisation, as well as to members and to the wider public. So we did produce a set of information as at the second period, so month 2, which is as at the end of May, and that gave an overview of the position where we were. We've then taken that on a further month to take us to the end of the quarter, to the end of June, and provided what looks like a similar report to previous years. So there's some familiarity there in relation to the format of the report. However, the content and the information provided within hopefully is extensive, and will give members an opportunity to consider and scrutinise the overall financial position. So as at the first quarter, we've identified that we've delivered around 89% of the savings that we would expected to deliver by that point in time. And if we project that forward through to the end of the year, we're looking at a savings delivery of around about 67% by the end of the year. That is in line with the end of year delivery over the last 3 to 4 years. But we are aware of the situation as at the end of June. So we've still got 3 quarters of the year to go to work on that remaining 33%. As it is, we're currently projecting that we should be closer to 90% delivered by the end of the year. That's in relation to the spending reductions. In addition to that, we then have the demand pressures. So these are the pressures that fall within service areas, within individual teams. They can be due to unforeseen circumstances or changes to what was originally projected. At the moment, we're identifying pressures, particularly within adults, children's and temporary accommodation. Those making up a pressure overall, which we're looking to balance out. The big part, a lot of work that's been done this year has been around creating the plan, around the Shropshire plan, creating the way in which, managing the way in which we're going to deliver our overall financial position this year. And that's about putting resilience in place around what we're calling a plan, Plan A+. So basically, the Plan A+ is the Plan A, which is deliver the Shropshire plan and deliver the savings, and then the plus bit is around making sure that we have resilience around that, which may mean ensuring that we have alternative plans in place, which may mean that we have reserves in place to ensure that any elements of the delivery or any other pressures that are identified, they take longer than to the 31st of March, the timescales that we have, that we're able to manage them. In addition, we have a strong financial position in terms of our cash, and we've built capacity around the delivery of the savings plan and around the demand management pressures in the work that we've done, working with with our strategic transformation partner, PwC, working with the newly identified and developed Office of the Chief Executive, and all of the work that we've done with the top cohort of staff around the organisation. Around 250 staff have gone through the Getting Leadership Right programme. So all of those in play, along with a series of mitigations around what does the financial position tell us at quarter 1, what are the actions depending on that, what is the financial position, what could it look like at quarter 2 and quarter 3, and what were the actions that we would take. So we're planning in advance for any concerns or essential elements that we need to pick up as part of that. The report itself does include within a series of detailed tables that go through individual service areas and demonstrate where those variances are up and down in the way that hopefully is familiar with to members seen in previous years. And of course, later on the agenda, we do have the performance monitoring report as well. So I would urge Scrutiny members to consider the financial implications alongside the performance implications, so that a fully rounded view is taken of the Council's overall position. So I'll stop there, Chair. If you require any further details, then Ben will be able to take you into more detail in relation to the individual areas, and I'm happy to take any details.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to ask 2 questions, one about an overspend and one about an underspend. Quite novel, isn't it? So the first question, I'm going to ask Benjay this because it's just something that we brought up at the Task and Finish group. So on page 35, it says there's a reduction in the adult social care business support and development, when that was an area identified for certainly investment.
Sorry, Chair. Are you asking me to comment on the detail around that?
Yes, I think that's the general idea. Thank you.
I do apologise. Right. Okay. Sorry. Bear with me 1 second. I'm just finding page 35 to pick up that particular piece of detail. Where am I? It's going to be a different page. I think that the key point here is that there are some reductions that we're able to make through some of those areas in terms of the way in which things are being funded. So the focus is very much upon the outcomes that we're working through, and the outcomes particularly in terms of the way that they're framed through the Shropshire plan. And some of those areas where previously we may have said that there is some work to be done and we need additional capacity and resource there, as per the details in the 110 lines of spending reductions set out in the MTFS approved by Council back in March, there were some elements within that where we were intending to capitalise staff costs. So part of it is around being able to capitalise some of those staff costs where they're genuinely transformational. So capital is usually an investment which yields a benefit over a number of years rather than through a single year. So if we can capitalise some of those costs effectively, we can reduce the pressure associated with that without actually reducing the level of resource going in at that point. So yes, it's a little bit of two sides of the same coin. You're absolutely right, Chair. There's an element of over and underspend within that, and I think if it appears at first sight that that area is seeing a reduction in spending, it may well be. I think that the key point there is that some of that is actually being charged elsewhere. The amount of investment happening through that and the amount of resource remains broadly the same, depending on the exact needs of the current year, but actually the charging for it is working in a slightly different way.
Okay, I think I'll perhaps take this further at the Task and Finish group. So the other question I've got is for Tanya. So on page 20, there's a 419,000 start team overspend. But my understanding is that when somebody leaves hospital for the first 6 weeks, that the money is actually picked up by the NHS from the CHC fund. Okay, so what I want to know is, are the NHS actually paying us back this money? So is it not really an overspend? I don't understand that bit. Or does that come in somewhere else?
That's a really good question, Chair. I guess the first point to make is that we've taken a tactical decision to over-recruit in our STAR in-house reopenment service, because we know that team provides the best outcomes to our patients leaving hospital. So you can come out with 2 routes, either through Start Reopen, which is our in-house reopenment support, or through a spot independent private provider. Now we know that when patients come out requiring start support, they require maybe 2 to 3 weeks support, and often don't require to need a long-term support. So we took a decision a few months ago to over-recruit in that team to reduce the amount of people coming out of hospital on a spot private domiciliary package, because we know we get better outcomes from our residents utilising START. What we need to do with the budget over the next few months is offset that against purchasing budget and flip it back into the START budget. On top of that, and you'll see that throughout the rest of the reports, we know during COVID we received additional grant funding from government to support the discharge. And we know the last couple of years that's tapered down, and this year in particular, that's tapered down to a tune of around £4 to £6 million less for the council, specifically regarding hospital discharge. Now, there was an announcement just before the summer of around 2 million, which is coming into this system, which is really positive. And we're also, I'll use the word bidding for some additional funding, because we are in a challenge system within Shropshire, we know that, in terms of our health providers. And because of that, the government have asked for councils like us to make an application for further funding, because we know we've seen significant pressures, particularly regarding hospital discharge. And we like to blow out figures, don't we? But we've seen a 115% increase in hospital discharge coming through to Shropshire Council.
So forgive me, but that's not really answered the question. So as far as I'm aware, the NHS should pick up the first 6 weeks of care when somebody's leaves hospital. So what I'm asking is, are they? That's the question I'm asking. Are they picking up the tab?
So local NHS have put a certain pot of money aside for hospital discharge. It's not covering enough, which is why we know we've got £4 to £6 million gap, which we talked about previously. We've made an application for further funding, but as it currently stands, there is not enough money coming through to Shropshire Council to support the rate of demand that's coming through to support people coming out of hospital.
Okay, so this is one of the areas in which we want to look at via the task and finish group, because I think it is a bit foggy at the moment. But my understanding is that the NHS should pay for the first 6 weeks, and clearly they're not. So we need to absolutely look into that. Right, thank you, Tanya. So have we got any more? Anybody else would like to ask any questions? Roger, you always got a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, right at the start of the report, staying in general, it states on page 7, revenue spending reductions 34.3 million, 11.4 million confirmed, and the balance delivery is expected. As a scrutiny committee, how is the £11.4 million being saved? Can some examples be given how that has been saved, please? Because I can put it there, but do we just accept this as gospel or not? Looking at many other councils in England, criticisms have been made at times that members have just accepted figures without querying the background to them. So there's 11.4, as I say, million confirmed as already fully delivered. Where has that been saved? How has that been saved? Really, why wasn't it done before, in previous years, if it's been done in the first 3 months? But the other balance, and also, if I can, whilst I'm here, I see that the spending pressures, demand-led services, 20.5 million, and I see the word demand management appears several times, and I'm not sure what that actually means. How is demand going to be managed in order to reduce that 20.5 million? Because really what we're talking about here is the originally projected £51 million worth of savings has now increased to £71 million worth of savings, albeit some of it may be capitalised, 3, 4, 5 million, but it's still over £60 million worth of savings. Some have been made, some have been identified, but I'd like to know a little bit more detail and what demand management actually means.
Okay, so there is something in the paperwork. I don't know if you want to put the page up on the screen, do you, James, or
On which page?
the bit about the £11 million? I think it is there, split up between the departments, but not actually itemised.
That's right.
Yes, I don't know if you want to put that up and talk to it, or are you happy just to talk to it? Have you got it on your screen? Have you, Roger, so you can see?
Yeah.
I've got a computer borrowed because I left mine at home. I've got it on paper. I've got the complete report here.
So if you'd like to talk to that first, James.
Yeah. So I'll hand over to Ben in a second, who might be able to take you through a bit more of the detail. But basically, what we have is a series of spending reductions that we've identified across the board. Now, some of those are fairly easy to deliver in the sense of If it's a restructure, for example, and that restructure requires a post to be removed from the establishment, then as soon as that's been agreed and taken through, that post can be deleted from the establishment, and that saving, be it 40,000, 50,000, whatever it may be, then go into that £11 million figure as delivered. There's difference between that and, for example, the savings delivery around and say increased income generation, whereby the first quarter has demonstrated that we are 3% of our income, and therefore we would expect to remain that 3% of our income based on the profile of the year, and therefore that saving would go into the remaining £22 million. There are also things like capitalisation costs, for example, where again there are elements of work that are being charged to transformation, which can be capitalised. Again, if that's been identified, that can be capitalised. That can then be demonstrated as a spending reduction and shown within the 11.4 million that was identified. So there's a number of examples, and say Ben may be able to identify a few more specific examples of where that is. But the basic principle is if the funding, the cost, the budget can be taken out of the establishment, out of the cost centre as at the 30th of June, that feeds into the £11 million of delivered. And if it's if it's suggesting that can be delivered, but we can't yet take the budget out, that will fit into the 34 million, and the bigger figure that's there.
Ben, sorry, what I suggest is, could you give us one example from each directorate, just so we get a flavour of it? And then if Roger wants to come back, but just give us an example. Thanks.
But by all means, so I'm just scanning through some of the detail as the conversation is developing. So some areas, so take some of the resources areas, for example. Within resources, there's treasury management. There are some savings targets that were within the MTFS related to improving some of the returns on investment income. We've been able to bank a substantial proportion of that already, not least because some of the bank rates, which aren't great, obviously, for residents where bank rates are going up, but actually in terms of the council's own treasury management activities, that means we're able to secure some additional receipts through the investment balances that we're able to hold. Some other areas where we've made reductions in resources include some areas where we've been able to reduce some of the amount spent on different areas of contracting. If I refer the committee back to table 3 in the report, the savings delivery, you can see that the 11.4 million delivered as at period 3. There are similar amounts through resources and corporate, slightly smaller amount in health, but the lion's share of the savings to be expected is coming through from people and place. Some of the areas where we've seen some of the savings coming through for people directorate, for example, is around looking at the areas of those MTFS savings which overlap with the hospital discharge activities that the committee was discussing a few minutes ago. So, for example, the expansion of reablement and the work around reablement, that's a part that's developing rapidly, and looking at some of the ways in which we can try to prevent individuals going into the hospital system as well, and working some of those areas through. Some of the place savings include areas such as looking at where some of the where there's been some vacant posts for a while, so just offering up those budgets. That's actually something which is happening across a lot of different budgets simultaneously, so we can work, so some of that's coming through. And if I just work through some of those other points in there, looking through as well, where in place some of the, again, it's a similar issue to the one I picked up previously, Chair, around capitalisation of staff costs, particularly in the Place Directorate. There are substantial capital investments and capital investment schemes which are in hand, and it's possible in the normal run of things to charge some of the costs of delivery of those schemes, the staff costs, into those capital costs, and we're just looking to make sure that we push that absolutely as far as possible, thereby reducing some of the pressures felt within the year in the revenue budgets. So there's a few examples there, Chair. I could carry on. I've got a number of different lines here that I could bring out, but maybe that's good enough to be going on with for now.
Yeah, that wasn't really very clear. I'm sorry, Ben.
I'm sorry. Okay, go on. How can I help?
Right. Roger, have you got anything else to say? And I've got, I think Tanya's going to talk about the other bit, but let's do the first bit first, I think. So, Roger, have you got anything else? And then I've got Rob wants to ask a question.
If I can pursue this a little bit further, because people, 4.9 million, claims 4.5 million. That's a lot of money to save in first 3 months. I presume that's the overall yearly saving, but it's still a quarter that is over nearly, over £1 million has been saved in each of them over the first 3 months of this current financial year. Surely I can have examples of how that size of saving can be made almost immediately when the financial year starts. Could have been made last year, maybe. And whilst I'm here, I see throughout the report, there's a reference about GLR and TON, T-O-N, has not been achieved, not been achieved, not been achieved. In many, many parts of this report, why haven't they been achieved if they were agreed by the directorates that it would be carried out? But as I say, these large amounts of money, I'd just like to see a list about the actual finances that have been saved by them.
Okay, so I think getting leadership right has only just actually come to an end, Roger. So they do have to have some time to do it. Tanya, are you answering that bit of the question or the second bit?
That bit.
That bit. Go on then.
Just thought it'd be helpful to listen to a couple of examples.
Can you get the mic a bit closer? Just the people on the you're listening in can't hear very well.
I've told that before. So just a couple of examples. I'm sitting here today with you. I guess it's stepping stones. You've heard us talk about this previously. It's a project that's put in place last year. Is this year, so the big chunk of savings for children's services has been about stepping children out of expensive residential placements, either into foster care or back home with their families. And then within adult social care, we increased our domiciliary fees by 12% in April. Again, that was a tactical decision because we could see through the back end of Q3 into Q4, we were really struggling to get people home because we didn't have the domiciliary care workers to support them. And what was happening, we were placing our residents into short-term spot placements at a really high cost. What we've been able to do is we've been able to recruit across the board in Shropshire, so not only in START, but also in the private sector, which has enabled more people to go home and therefore reduced the amount of our residents in short-term residential places, much better outcome for them. Then the third area is around income. So we've seen an increase in income from health in terms of contributing towards some of those more complex care packages.
But not enough. Roger, did you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I'll rephrase it. It's a Q1 savings, this, of course. But stepping stones, I congratulate the staff all the way from the top right the way through to the lowest level on the initiative that is done, and that is what is being delivered. But did we not know that was going to be done prior to April the 1st of this year? If we did, then why is it a saving for this year? It should have been projected into the financial papers that went to the council for agreement back in the end of February. These look like they're new savings, and if stepping stones is one of them, congratulations, but it seems that suddenly we are getting a lot more through than what we expected back in February.
So Gwen wanted to say something. Did you want to say something, Gwen?
I'll perhaps let Tanya come back on that point first, Chair, rather than disjoint.
I mean, I think for me, it is a new initiative, and I think it's very hard to have a crystal ball to look at actually what you're going to do. But there you go, Tanya.
So we tripled the funding, remember, so that we tripled the funding and the support from this April. So we worked with a cohort of children to pilot it, to test if that model would work. It produced that it did. We tripled the funding and therefore increased the resources from April. And so already this year we have avoided 12 children and young people coming in to become looked after. And Stepping Stones are actively working with, up-to-date figure in front of me, 218 children in 136 families, of which 99 of those children are children looked after. And there is a plan in place to work with those children and their families to see if we can step them down in this year. But it's not
It's not a 5-minute job, I'm sure you'll all understand it, in terms of working with these children, quite complex for families.
And can I just say, oh, sorry, Willem.
No, all I was going to say, I think it's, am I working yet?
Yeah.
I think it's a good example of a change to a target operating model of doing things differently. And a lot of that will be by trial. And that's a good example of trying to do something differently and working to the market. But I just wanted to pick up on Roger's point, which is a very valid point of why haven't we done this before? You know, why haven't we made this £11 million before? And I think we just need a bit of reflection on the journey we've been on over the last 4 years. If we go back to 2019, we were still expecting fairer funding. And then COVID turned up on the doorstep and we were put into aspect for 2 years. And we're coming out of COVID, we made the decision that we could see the national agenda had changed, and that's when we took the decision on the Shropshire Plan. We took the decision to have the LGA peer review. We took the decision to take the responsibility within house and not rely on others. And we have moved forward with the Shropshire Plan to come forward through the MTFS with the detailed savings. Now, those detailed savings are effectively what we think or like was going to happen. If they're not definites, we can get there definitely, great. If we can get further, even better. But they are a plan of the direction in which we want to go. And I think as we move forward, working with all the scrutinies is working together to see how they actually deliver moving forward. Because the more we can get, the more we can actually deliver to the policies to help people. So valid questions, but let's not forget the journey that we've been on and us taking control under the Shropshire Plan. Thank you.
So I want to ask a question, and actually I'll let you come back, Roger, but it is really about Roger's question. So if you look at the table 3, the savings, you've got 4.9 million in people and 4.5 million in place. If you look at their total budgets, you know, it's roughly, well, it's roughly, you know, 5% of people, but if you look at place, it's a huge percentage of their overall budget. So could you give us a bit more information on where the savings are coming from place? So I appreciate Mark's not here today, he's on a training course, but if you could, or Gwynn, somebody could give me a bit more information on that, or James, I'm not fussy.
I can give you more information. Ben, have you managed to pull together a kind of response in relation to what those specifics around place? I can pull some together myself, but I think you've had a little bit more time to sort that through.
So just looking at those while the conversation is developing, and I think it's I think the key areas that we're seeing, there's some work around key points. I mean, I mentioned already charging staffing costs into capital budgets, and some of that's coming through. It's not all of that in the 4.5 million in table 3, but it is in the longer term position. So the moving from the 4.5 to the 10.1, but within that, there's, you know, we're looking at 2 million or so relating to those increased capitalisation of staff costs. Also looking at the way in which we're applying grant funding and making sure that we really maximise the benefit to the authority in lots of different ways around grant funding. And there's a total and a target around there, particularly on some of the highways side of things, around just under £1 million. So between the staffing capitalisation and some of the grant funding, that there's pushing towards sort of 3 million or so there. Also looking across the board, I mean, this is something which the organisation has been carrying vacancies in different ways for quite a number of years. And part of what we've done in order to help bridge the gap in the current year is to look at things like where we've got some vacant posts which have been vacant fairly consistently for a number of years. I'm just looking at the totals for part of Place Directorate. Again, there's about 900,000 in there. So some of that to reflect and to answer some of the points, Chair, that you've been asking, and also Roger, some of your questions. Some of those savings which have already been landed are where we have quite simply taken some of those budgets, because actually we know there aren't any costs that are going to be booked against them as we go through the course of the year. Vacant posts is a good argument around that. I think it's important to note that in that sense, we're not, you know, those posts were already, they're funded but vacant. So we didn't have that capacity last year. We don't have that capacity this year, but actually by making a permanent change to the budget, that helps us to achieve some of the 51.4 million savings overall that we're seeking to target. So I guess in the background of some of that is how could you possibly do that so quickly in the current year? Well, if it's simply the deletion of a funding line within the budget, that's actually very straightforward to do, and we can book that as being something which is taken and sorted straight away. So I hope that gives a couple of examples there. I can carry on having a bit of a scroll through, and I can come back in due course with a couple more examples if that would help, Chair.
That would be really helpful. James wants to come back, and then I'll let Roger, and then I've got David, and then Rob, and then Julia.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to reiterate some of the points that have been made. In relation to just looking at the detail around the place directory, Ben's absolutely right. There are a number of areas, for example, removal of vacant posts. They don't impact on any particular service directly. They are across the directorate. And so to say which services are these impacting on is kind of, it's an amalgam across the directorate. What we're seeing is that the areas that are able to deliver those savings in the first quarter are those areas where we're able to deliver the budget. So what we're not seeing is, right, we've now been able to transform and reconsider this particular service area within the space of 3 months. Now, what you've seen in the first 3 months is these are the areas where we've identified potential and in the example of a vacant post, we know that historically we have a turnover rate of around about 45% a year. So by setting a vacancy level at 3%, actually that's quite achievable. So it's relatively straightforward to then be able to say, we're actually going to capture that as a saving in the first quarter. What we were doing in previous years, because there were always those vacancy turnover rates, is we weren't banking those in the first quarter. So what you would see is at quarter one, a big overspend, at quarter two, we get better, at quarter three, because those vacant posts that weren't being filled would be then taken out as we work through the year. Now we're saying, what can we take out immediately to demonstrate that we've delivered some of the savings proposals, and we've built our spending reductions around those sorts of proposals. I suppose the message underneath this is, as we move through each quarter, as we move through each month, we're going to get into the more difficult savings. We're going to get into those areas that are much more specific to, this is what we're doing around this particular service area, this is what we're doing around this particular outcome that we're trying to deliver. Those can't be delivered quickly. So the simpler, easier, bigger picture ones is what you'll see to start with, which is why it's quite difficult for us to explain this is the saving. Actually, as Ben said, capitalisation of costs, the vacancy management, and the application of grant funding. They're three huge areas which are in the millions, all of which we can demonstrate have been delivered. But actually, what does that impact on? Well, it depends which particular grant we're talking about. And what we're talking about in terms of those grants are, we were applying X% to the coverage of existing costs. We're able to apply more of that. So we can't give you that level of detail I think you're looking for.
Okay, thank you, James. Right, so I've got Roger, then Rob, then David and Julia. So Roger, quickly, to give the answer go.
Yeah, thank you, and I'll give way to the others. Is that if one looks at page 36, delivery of 23-24 savings proposals, you'll see delivered 34 million. No, it hasn't. It's projected delivery. All that's delivered is the 11. The other, there are expectations it will be delivered, not that it is delivered. But if one looks also at people, at what the total expected on the budget savings are, and we'll go to place that was referred to earlier on, £16.7 million place expected to be saved. If one comes back to table 3, it shows now the full year forecast is 10 million. That is £6 million adrift. What we're saying is that there's no plans in place, does not know where this is going to be delivered. So in total, that is 17 million. And on top of that, the £20 million, which is demand management, we'll look at. And I haven't heard anything about the demand management, how that 20 million, which is a very high figure, going to be saved by the end of this financial year. when it's only just been identified?
Okay, so James, I'm sure you've got the answer to that question.
Sorry, Jim, before
Hang on.
is that maybe stepping stones and the children could get referred to the appropriate scrutiny committee for that, to go deeper into it, so that it can be. I'm trying to stay global rather than go into the individual. So that's why I'm staying with the large figures and hoping that the individual other scrutiny overview committees can actually delve a little bit deeper, or the task and finish group.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that the detail will come out in the task and finish groups. James.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm looking at the table, Appendix 3. It's under 2.1 summary, and there's a table there that demonstrates how the £51.4 million worth of spending reductions are broken down over each of the directorates. And what that shows is the £34 million is delivered. I agree in relation to the specific point around that £34 million delivered is split between 11.4 million, which is in the bank, and the other 22.9 million, which is projected to be delivered. However, for the point of that table is just demonstrating what breakdown of the 51 million is basically there and projected to be delivered, and which of those are projected still to be delivered. I think I just need to point out that the 17 million that is still to be delivered, there are plans around those. Those plans were drawn up at the start of or ahead of the current financial year, and we're working through those plans. So they're identified as still to be delivered. As I said in my introduction, we are, for planning purposes, we expect at least 90% of the 51.4 million to be delivered by the end of the year. So if we're working on 90%, we're only talking about sort of in the region of £2 to £3 million that will not be delivered. That will be based around the particular implications and issues in relation to that particular savings project. It won't be because there are plans in place. It won't be because they have not been fully formed or worked up. But given that these are projections, we have to take a line at some point to say we believe this will be delivered, and we believe this won't be. So I would expect to see that £17 million reduce as we work through each month and as reported each quarter. And I would expect the vast majority of that 17 million to be delivered by the end of the financial year.
Okay, right, I'm going to move on now, Roger. So, Rob.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Councillor Rob Gittins. In the past, we were told that a lot of these savings would be about doing things differently. Could officers give some examples of newer systems or new ways of doing things that are now being put in place? So how have we essentially transformed in order to deliver these savings? Thank you.
So actually, Tanya's actually said a bit about that with stepping stones, because I think you've tried something new and it's worked. But James,
yeah, I was going to say actually there are a series of transformation programs that we've put together around adults, children's, commercial, around a target operating model. Around the customer experience. All of those are around transforming the organisation and transforming the way that we work as an organisation. Some of those, not all of them, will be linked to delivery of a direct delivery of the spending reductions. So, for example, one area that I'm involved in is around the increase of automation across the organisation. Now, this will partly impact on the public. So this will be in ways in which we look to automate processes which hopefully will improve the customer experience. But actually, there's a whole series of back office automation and reduction of duplication and increase in efficiency in the way that we work across our systems. Each of those will deliver efficiency savings. Those efficiency savings will then lead to the opportunity to reconsider and redeploy where we actually want to use our kind of use the people that we have within the organisation. So some of those will be directly linked to a spending reduction. So if we have an area of work which we can then automate and reduce, then we can take a direct cashable saving from that. In other areas, there will be non-cashable, but they will still be worth doing because of the increased efficiency throughout that. There are a number of areas. So Tanya has already spoken about some of the initiatives that are happening within the adults and children's world. There are also transformation programs built in around some of the place initiatives. The biggest area there is around the waste service and looking to see what we can do to transform the way in which we manage that contract. Some of these are longer burn and will take a long period of time to work through. So that's where the Plan A plus I referenced earlier is important. That's about ensuring that if we have a plan to deliver, that plan takes a little bit longer than we anticipated, but we put some resilience around it to A, make sure it's delivered, and B, manage the interim, because we know our position is reported as at the 31st of March, and although that may not be the ideal time to report, we have to ensure that we've got a balanced budget by that at that point in time. So I think more examples will come out as we work through this. The important point to note is where these are efficiency savings, we will get on with them and deliver those. Where there is any change in relation to the service through a policy change in the way in which those will be delivered, that will be coming back to Cabinet for approval.
Okay, thank you. Gwyneth, you wanted to just say something?
I think I just wanted to share with the committee one example that really sticks in my mind is around the laptops, on how we're actually working totally differently. Historically, as you will know, we'd sit around this room and we'd all have sort of different sort of laptops, some Lenovo's, some different sort of makes, and you'll actually notice now we've nearly all got Microsofts. And that's historically we'd go out and source the laptops, then we'd actually spend time with our officers actually trying to get all the software that we needed, the security and the time that takes on every single laptop. And the cost of buying them, and then we wouldn't actually replace them for a few years until staff started complaining and my laptop's not working, etc., etc. Well, now we've actually got a contract with Microsoft. We actually get the actual laptops actually turn up already loaded with everything we need, so we don't have to do all that stuff. We then actually went back to Microsoft and actually said, well, instead of buying them, why can't we lease them? And if we lease them, we pay we get new laptops every 3 or 5 years, depending on the contract. So we don't go through all that staff having problems with their laptops. Everybody's got the same piece of machinery. And then we turn around to them, as we do with the pension fund. If we give you the lease payments up front for the 3 years, can you give us a further discount? And so we do that. So let alone is it giving us a better level of service for the staff, more modern equipment on a relatively good basis. We don't have to put a sinking in fund for capital process in the future to do more, but it also gives our IT staff more time to work on target operating models and making this organisation more efficient and modern and driven for the future. So that's a real live example, Jeff.
Okay, thank you. So before we finish on Rob's question, I want to just pick something up with Andy. So you've been doing Getting Leadership Right. And from what I understand, when you do the Getting Leadership Right, you get ideas of the staff about how they can do things differently and save money. Can you just comment on that in relation to Rob's question? Because I think that's quite important.
Yeah, I think the GLR is a fundamental element of transformation for the organisation, because where we've talked about experience within this organisation, particularly when we've tried to apply transformation programmes, they've been one-dimensional in that you try and change the organisation, or you try and train the staff. The idea of GLR is bringing that all together so that you take staff out and train them in a different way, you develop them in a different way, but you put them back into an organisation that itself is changing and developing. So the two means that it's got a far better chance of success. In terms of what it needs to deliver, those individuals that have been on it, don't forget this is the first cohort. We're now running the second cohort of those. So this was the top 250 in the organisation. As part of that, they've had to apply their learning throughout the delivery of the course. That's seen real changes in both structure, practice, delivery of services. What we said at the end of this now is that we've attached a financial impact to some of that work. So we expect that to be coming through, because it's not just around picking the staff's brains for new ideas, that's some of it, but actually, and this refers, Roger, to some of your questions around demand management, that there's a particular element of GLR which is precisely around understanding the demand that you should be meeting. And part of that is understanding the demand that you should not be responding to. So you're making sure that those individuals are very clear who lead parts of the organisation that what they're doing adds value to that purpose, and what doesn't add value should be removed. Now that's quite transformational. That releases capacity, or in some cases directly leads to financial savings. So there's some examples there, but it's absolutely within now the fabric of the organisation. It's not an add-on, it's not a training course. This needs to be part of the culture of the organisation. That's how we've intended to do it.
Okay, thank you, Andy. So I've got David, Julia, and then Joyce. David, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, it's a series of questions, comments, really. The problem with the finances in the past has been the inability to achieve savings. And it seems to me what's being presented here is the fact that we are making savings much earlier and claiming them much earlier. And I think there could be a bigger problem down the track, it seems to me, compared to previous years. And I think also we're capitalising a lot of staff costs. What happens long term when those particular capital projects are finished is another question. But so I do worry that the overall situation of the council has not changed. We're just moving the chairs around the Titanic, if you like, and that the demand management really seems to me is about making cuts. It's another way of saying cuts, because what you're saying is, the Chief Executive said just now, is that you're looking at things which we don't need to do, basically, things which we can cut out of our provision. And I worry that, in actual fact, what's happening is that officers are making decisions about cutting things here, there and everywhere, and which results in a poorer service of people. And I do worry that at the end of the day, we will be in the same situation as last year, and we actually don't achieve the savings. And if you look at the graph on page 36, there are quite a few savings that we've made towards in the last month. I wonder whether those savings are actually going to be achievable. And I do worry about this plan. I'm concerned that we will not achieve the savings we should be achieving, and we'll be in a very bad situation at the end of the financial year.
It's a shame you didn't come up with a specific question, just a political statement. William, would you like to answer that?
Thank you, David, for your interpretation of things. I'd actually like to put the record a bit straight and bring things back to the order of what we've done. Back in March, we delivered the MTFS, which actually showed our proposal of £51 million worth of reduction in savings. Prior to that, we gave you the opportunity for an alternative budget. And it's all very easy to sit there in opposition and criticise us. And I'm welcome at any time for you to bring to the table other opportunities to reduce our spend. I'm more than welcome to listen to you. But the fact of the matter is, we have to deliver a balanced budget. We have put forward in the MTFS all those lines of savings, and we are well on the way to delivering them. I'm not complacent. I have an element of what you're saying, that there may be an element that we will have a rocky road over the winter, and we will have to work even harder and come to Cabinet with unsavoury options to ensure that we bring a balanced budget in next year. And I will not shy away from that. But please, if you are going to criticise us, please give us an alternative, what you would do. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwyneth. Okay, Julia. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. So first of all, I'd just like to say that we really appreciate the level of detail that's gone into this report. And I want to thank James and Ben. Previously, we've asked for lots of detail and we've struggled to find it. And I think that today we have been given lots more information, and it's really helpful to us to understand what has happened, what is happening and where we're at. So I really appreciate that. Some of you will remember before the summer holidays, we were hoping to have period 1 and period 2 reports, and for lots of different reasons, members didn't get them. But we did see staff
receive a briefing that you had already saved 17 million. So it's quite helpful today that we get an official briefing that explains you've actually saved 11 million. And I think James has hit the nail on the head using the word you've identified the remaining 23 million to be saved by the end of the year. That's a much more useful phrase than claiming what you've already saved. I get it, you've identified it, and if you keep doing the same, it will fall through. And I'd just like to, there's three areas really that I'm concerned about. One is we'll talk about demand, one is about income, and the last one is about cuts, which I believe haven't happened yet. And I think that personally, I'm quite reassured to hear that the first quarter savings are more around this accountancy trick of reallocating budgets to capital, using external grants to pay for revenue to free up our option to classify capital so that our revenue budget is protected. And I can see why that delivers a quick result, and that's to be applauded. And as you say, James, if we continue that through, then that should be, of all of them, a more painless way to achieve some of these savings. So I then do share the concern about what will be coming at the end of the year when we've done all of those and we have to start looking at the cuts and things that will change. The other thing that worries me a lot is this description of pressure. So the additional pressure, which is currently identified as just over 20 million. I'm assuming, and this is a question, that that is a pro rata figure, that based on quarter one, we've talked about some services are at 1.5 twice their current cost, that then based on the full year, that gets us to 20 million. But we all know that the year is lumpy. The first quarter is not the difficult quarter, is it? It's autumn, winter that is the difficult quarter, especially for adult services. And I'd like to also suggest that one of the reasons we're seeing increased demand in adult services and children's services and in homelessness is because of the cost of living crisis, the increase in interest rates, so leading to homelessness because of mortgages, the increase in cost of living costs, which is putting pressure on families that may already be struggling for other reasons. So what worries me is that that's not going to go away. The underlying causes of the pressures are continuing, and we usually, if we think about the trend of a year, think of the chart across that year, that bell curve, we usually see it increase in quarter 3 and 4. So I'd like some reassurance, please, that that lumpy bell curve has been taken into account when you distributed the pro rata figure of 20 million, because basically I'm worried it could be higher than 20 million. And that leads me on to income. At the start of this, you say that the net budget has increased by 20 million. I think what you mean is you've taken 20 out of reserve to put them in the base budget. Our income has not increased by 20 million. And in several places, there is an admission that we've got what appears to be an underachieved saving because demand for services where they pay traded services is down. In other words, income is down. Planning applications, SIL application, developer applications, because of the increased interest rate, it is more expensive to build, and so our income stream is down. And what we need is a really accurate prediction of how that plays out through the year. Finally, I just want to pick on a few points which worry me. Really pleased to hear William say once again that your door is open, you welcome our suggestions. We did make a suggestion from the Labour group about social workers. We put it in our alternative budget. We brought it to this scrutiny committee. We brought it to cabinet. You promised me to go away and look at it. We said you're facing a £1.3 million overspend on agency fees because we think you should pay social workers a higher rate. We think you should align with neighbouring authorities and agree an agreed similar rate so that we're not, hemorrhaging from each other and increase conditions. Today, we're looking at a report that tells us one of the main areas of overspend, £1.3 million on social workers, because largely due to agency fees. So I like to hear you say you welcome our suggestions. I love it when you say we can bring them to the table. So far, that's been rather fruitless because we keep describing what we feel needs to be done, and we know that we are hemorrhaging social workers, and we know that that continues to be a cost on the budget. Finally, in a similar vein, there's a £4.49 million overspend on external residential placements. In the same report, it tells us that our own internal children's residential home, Ifton House, is closed. Why? Why are we overspending by nearly £5 million on external placements when we have our own home for children and we have locked the door? Can we have some answers to this?
Okay. So I'm going to get James to answer the first bit.
Okay.
I think the bit about the overspend on the social workers and the bit about the external placements, I think we need to take that up at the task and finish group. I think two things though, Julia, we all live in the real world, and the problem is that all the neighbouring authorities are all bidding for the same social workers. So they're not going to agree that we all pay the same, because what they like, or what we like to do, and we're exactly the same, if we pay somebody £5 more an hour, they're going to come here and then they'll go there. I think from what I've seen and spoken to Helen, I don't think our external social workers are any greater than any of our neighbouring authorities. But I think that's something that we should take away and do through the task and finish group. And then I'll leave James to it. Tell us what the interest rates are going to be on the 1st of every month from now until next April. Yeah, followed by the lottery numbers. Yeah. Okay.
I'll just start with that.
Go on, James.
Okay, so just to pick up on a few points that were made there. In terms of the detail in the report, I'm glad that that's welcome. That's what we always said we would be doing. Quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3 will be where that detail is shown. The in between months, we're producing further information which will build on that. The first one was at period 2. There wasn't a period 1 that was produced. That was explained to members. In terms of the period 2, yes, there was a staff briefing. That staff briefing was the same one that was passed to members, so no additional information was passed out at period 2. I just want to make that clear. Everybody had the same picture at period 2, and at period 3, again, everybody has the same picture. It's built into the quarter 1 monitor. I wouldn't call it an accountancy trick. I think it's far more important an issue than that. What we have done, as has been explained in relation to the savings at the first quarter, it's not exclusively this, but what we've looked at is the ways in which we can deliver savings by the way in which we manage the grants, the way in which we manage or charge things to transformation. Now, you can't charge staff costs to transformation unless you have a transformation programme in place, and unless your external auditors are happy to confirm that the work that you've done is based on transformation. So there is no trick around this. It's simply appropriate charging of those costs. We knew as we came into this financial year that we would be undertaking a transformation programme which was cross-cutting and whole scale in terms of the organisation. That then meant, because we had planned this by enabling the council agreed to this, that we could then use capital funding to fund transformation. You have to ask for a dispensation from government every year. We asked for that, and therefore, because that was approved by council, we were able to do that. So there's a lot more involved in relation to this. In relation to the pressure of the 20.5 million, what we're talking about there is an estimation of this point in time based on the way in which the costs and pressures will be profiled over the year. So absolutely, it takes into account the fact that there will be an expectation, a model around how these services will be impacted across the summer, across the winter, etc. Is that model 100% correct? Of course it isn't. It's an estimate, it's a model of where we think we will be. And adding to that, it's an estimate of where that line cuts off at the 31st of March 2024. The reality is the pressure, the demand management model that we've built and that we're working our way through is going to take longer than the 31st of March to deliver. That's why we have the Plan A Plus in place. So it's about how do we manage that figure, whatever that will be, and don't forget there will be the budget will change in 24-25 because there will be growth built into the service areas. So what we're talking about is how do we bring the line of expenditure in line with the line of budget. And at the point at which they cross, what we then have to do is manage the position in between, and we have to manage that position as at the 31st of March. I just want to ask a question if I can. The point was made around income has increased or has not increased by £20 million. Are we talking about resources or are we talking about fees and charges? 'Cause I wasn't sure what that reference was to. So
There you go, Julia.
Yeah, so in the report, in your report, it says that that the net budget has increased by 20 million.
Yep.
But later in the report, when it refers to income streams, which I don't think they mean charges like car park, it specifically talks about issues around trading service like planning applications, it's down. The only other reference I can find to 20 million is the 20 million we've moved from savings into revenue. So I'm asking you, do you mean simply that you've enlarged the revenue budget by 20 million, or do you actually anticipate an increase of 20 million in income from fees, charges, traded services? Because I'm very concerned the latter might not be achievable in this current economic situation.
I thought it related to the end spend actually, Julia, so I don't understand either. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That clarification is helpful. We're talking about three different things here. So, I mean, literally three different things. So one is the resources. The net budget has gone up by £20 million. That's because based on the funding that was provided through the settlement, based on our assumptions around the growth model in terms of cost of expenditure, the net budget has increased by £20 million. So there was £20 million more to spend this year. The issue was that our expenditure projections took that £50 million above that.
Yeah.
So the spending reduction is to bring it down, but there's still a £20 million increase. There is then a completely separate £20 million, which was built into reserves. That was in relation to a one-off through the settlement through the RFP, where spending rural services. Can't remember the acronym, SFA, I think it is. That funding was then a one-off that went straight into the reserves position. That has no bearing on the council's net budget. It's a different £20 million. So we've got two different things there, and then separately we've got fees and charges. There is an assumption around increases in fees and charges which have been built in. The biggest areas of those are going to be around things like car parking, planning, etc. That overall figure is not is not going to be £20 million in terms of that increase, but that is the bit that we're monitoring now over the year. So where we are seeing that being delivered, that's being captured. Where we're seeing that not being delivered, or where there are pressures, again we've got a model around what that looks like by the end of the year, and that is then coming through in relation to that in-year variance that we're seeing within services. So it is three different elements. That's helpful.
Yeah,
helpful. It all happened to be 20 million. That's it.
Yeah, so that was right.
Thank you for that.
Right. So the other bit I was going to say, and I recognise the point Julie's made, and we'll deal with them in the task and finish group. But I think when you have a snapshot like this, it doesn't always tell you the exact picture. It gives you a bit of a flavour. So the one thing that I was expecting Julie to pick out was actually, I think it's the fostering service is £1 million overspent. Now I presume that's to do with the increased fostering and the training that's going on. So actually, it's a good thing. So I think actually you would get a lot more detail from the task and finish group and actually put some of this together. Although this gives you the headlines as to where to look. So thank you very much. So I've got Joyce and then Julia, and then I think that's about it. Roger.
Thank you. James, when you mentioned about savings, you mentioned the clear contract and renegotiating. What are you expecting to come out of that? Can you expand on it? And do you think there are real genuine savings to be made there?
So, do you say Kia contract?
Yeah.
Because I mentioned about the waste contract.
Oh, the waste contract. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
Do you mean
no waste?
You're through us. Sorry. Through your chair. Sorry. Right. So in relation to that, it's early days. We're talking about a PFI contract. We're talking about a lot of work that needs to be done in relation to that. So I can't give you an update in relation to what that would look like. All I can say is that it's a big complex contract which we're spending in the order of over £50 million a year. Therefore, there are options in terms of service delivery. There are options in terms of the way in which we pay. There are options in terms of the way in which that contract is delivered. extensions or reductions in that. There are options around buying out. There's all sorts of things that can be looked at. I'm not suggesting that any or all of those will be the elements that are taken forward, but all of these are being considered and looked at as part of that contract review to see what the art of the possible is. We need to do that working very closely with Veolia because obviously there's an impact from their point of view. But it's early days in relation to what that looks like at the moment.
Okay. So Gwyneth, did you want to say something?
Can I come in at the end, Chairman?
Oh yeah, of course you can. Yeah. So Julian.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of comments and then 3 questions. I mean, firstly, perhaps it's because the meeting is bigger than usual, but just, to remind people this is a scrutiny committee, and I think the ping pong on whether people should do alternative budgets or not is perhaps better saved for full council. And I think the questions that were being asked were legitimate ones, especially about the trajectory of cuts towards the end of the year. And the second thing, actually, just on that is, let's be honest, this is an alternative budget. There is an alternative budget being presented by officers, which is involving quite a lot of new and some quite exciting initiatives around investing to save in bringing people out of hospitals, around capitalisation of staff costs, around finding grant funding, which is exciting, which perhaps wasn't being found at all. So effectively, we are in an alternative budget. My questions are this then. So firstly, on that grant funding, it was interesting to hear that in reference to the Place Committee that we're maximising on grant funding. Is there a value in having an opportunities register alongside our risk register? It's something that Sheffield has done, and it's about actually sort of ensuring that every opportunity out there for raising funds from all those grants is being made. So that's a question of, is that something that other people are using, and is it something that would be of value? The second question is to do with the nature of the trajectory. Like other people, I'm looking at this graph on whatever page it is, 32, where it ticks up very sharply towards the end. And based on James Watson's comments, is it accurate to say that as we shift through the year, the nature of the savings is going to get tougher on communities? That at the moment we're going through some changes which are organisational and perhaps not very painful, but would it be accurate to say they're going to get more painful? And then the final question based on that really is, can we have some impact assessment of those changes? Because, just going right back to the beginning and Roger's first question, actually, what we didn't get today was the detail on what the savings actually were. And Roger brought some of that detail out. And that was what I came here to really hear, if you like, where those, and there's some really interesting positive stuff there. But as we go forward, we're being, I think, warned that it will get tougher, and it will get tougher on our communities as well. So alongside that, I think we need to be serious about looking at what those impacts are. So can we have, alongside these reports, some sort of an impact assessment of what that impact is going to be on communities rather than on the organisation's bottom line?
I think actually some of the impacts will be on the performance indicators, which we're going to deal with later on. But would you like to answer, Andy, would you like to answer that, or James? Do you want to have a go, Andy?
Yeah, more than willing. I think, just stepping through what you said there, I think the opportunity register is a great idea and one we should steer with pride. And I think that should form part, actually, of all the work that we're doing at the moment, because it's not just around identifying those issues and those risks, but it is indeed what those opportunities, either internally, externally, commercially, grant funding, anything of that nature. Being realistic, I think, yes, there will be painful decisions having to be made as we go forward throughout the financial year. I reiterate what James has said previously, that these are all projections. The entire MTFS is a projection. And it's our best guess at any one time. This is a report after Q1. And so we've got to respond to those variations in those trajectories. So I wouldn't shy away again from saying that there will be some painful decisions. However, I think bringing just a point in terms of will it all be painful for communities? I think it goes back to a point that Julia raised earlier as well around the cost of living crisis. And it helps us to talk about actually what demand management really means. Because if we are in contact with our communities and understand the impact of the cost of living crisis is having, then that's really where demand management comes into play, because if we can do something by working either ourselves, community and voluntary sector colleagues, others that are able to engage with communities and do something different that would help perhaps provide that minimum support that people need at a time of crisis, that stops them spiralling and escalating, if you like, into a more critical position where they require services. So I think that's a really good example of that. So I'm trying to answer that question, Julie, kind of fairly by not shying away from it, but I also think there are opportunities, particularly around demand management in relation to that.
Okay, thank you. So I did let Julian ask a question, even though he's not on the committee. I did see some murmuring down at the bottom left there. So, Councillor Bendick, if you want to ask a question, you are invited to do so.
Thank you, Chair. My questions are around KPIs and they're not this topic.
So you want to ask at the next bit?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Roger, if you can be quite quick, so I think you've had quite a lot of questions off you.
I'll try, Chairman.
Yeah.
I refer to the report in front of us.
Sorry? Oh, sorry, Ben, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, there's just a couple of points that have come up in the discussion, and it might be helpful to give a little bit of insight to the committee as to how some of the work has been brought together, if that's okay. But,
okay, do you want to just let Roger ask his question first, and then you
by
can
all
do
means,
that at the end?
Yeah, by all means.
You do your bit at the end, and then I'm going to come to Gwyneth because he wants to say something at the end. Okay, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I note in the recommendations, it says Transformation Improvement Scrutiny Committee recommended to note the position and identify any areas for further consideration by scrutiny. Can I suggest that 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7 need further investigation? That is the current forecast overspend, and it's detailed in there where social care may be able to reduce this, and this is a £20 million that I'm talking about, will actually reduce it, including work is underway to manage demand and remodel the service through the Re-enablement Transformation Programme, aimed at supporting people to live more independently. Again, in 8.6, deliver a sustainable budget projection. However, it's acknowledged that this may take time to implement, and therefore short-term funding of these and other pressures may be required whilst plans are put into action. And then in 11.2, it actually says that it is anticipated that one-off resources will be identified. None of that information is here. Some of it can be looked at the next scrutiny committee, but I'd like to know one-off resources will be identified. I thought we were really, really struggling to deliver this, but apparently there's some one-off resources which can be used to deliver the savings which will not be made until the next financial year. And it comes back to the recommendation that's in the paper at 3.1 about this scrutiny, what it considers should be further considered. Some of it can be referred to task and finish, but some of it I think needs more investigation by this scrutiny and some extra information. Maybe Ben can explain how that is going to be achieved, because there's a lot in here. How is it going to be done? Thank you.
Okay, so first off, there shouldn't be any recommendations for this committee on the paper, because I think I'm ugly enough to come up with my own recommendations, I usually do. So, Ben, have you got anything to say? And then I'll let Willem say his bit, and then we'll move to recommendations then.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just very briefly, I think there was a point Councillor Vasma made early on around the timing of the delivery and whether or not we were simply moving things forward in the year. I think the point I would want to raise around that is that if we only counted the savings as they were secured through the course of the year, we would leave an awful lot of uncertainty through into Q3 and Q4, which wouldn't give us the opportunity on the officer side to take the necessary actions to ensure that we remained in the right position financially. So there is this difficult balance to be struck between taking some of those numbers quite early on in the year, but recognise also the risk of doing so. So not wanting to place sort of undue reliance on that. The alternative is we could end up needing to make more interventions than we would want to at this point, because it doesn't look like we're going to achieve everything. But then it turns out in the end that maybe we didn't need to do that. So I'm trying to get the balance of different perspectives correct here, with a view to how quickly we're taking some of that. There was a point also, Councillor Buckley, around the proratering of the adult social care forecast. I think it's probably worth just pointing out don't underestimate the complexity of that piece of work. There is a degree of proratering, exactly as you say, but we're working across 3 to 4 points of delivery, 3 or more, probably 4 or more different cohorts that we're working through on that. That's prorated in a way which is adjusted for the seasonal variations we've seen in prior years, and is an ongoing piece of work which is quite complex. Which we do need to bring forward in that way. I think the other point I would raise around, or 2 points I'd raise here. I think it's really helpful to hear some of the comments that that members have brought forward. Actually, they're all in exactly the same space as the comments that officers are bringing forward. So I think we're all working very much on the same set of ideas. But I think the last point for me is that I'm a bit concerned, Chair, that perhaps some of the answers I gave particularly early on in the meeting, to be honest, I wasn't quite ready for where some of the questions came from. So I didn't have the answers to hand, or to be able to provide in the right way and to give the best account I could of where the authority is up to. Just for clarity, there's 110 separate lines in the MTFS, and the questions have bounced around not unreasonably between what's the year-to-date delivery and what's the year-end forecast. So that gives me overall something like 220 separate figures to stay across. And some of these are questions which I've been dealing with officers already. Some of them are quite different. But there may be a question in there, something we can consider for future discussions around if it's possible to get some of the questions out earlier. It will be easier for me and James and others to provide the kinds of answers that you're looking for in the committee in a satisfactory way. So just a couple of observations there, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to bring those forward.
Okay, Gwyneth.
Are we finishing off now, Chair?
Yes, well, after you've spoken, I'm going to come up with a recommendation.
I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to come to this meeting. We talk about getting the figures in front of you today. We actually set up a meeting on the 16th of August with the Chief Executive and James Walton, with opposition leaders, to actually look at these figures. And then I was giving them those figures prior to Cabinet, prior to the start, and prior to the full membership. Unfortunately, only Roger turned up. I'm more than happy. Nobody sent any deputies or any other representation, but I'm more than happy to continue along those lines. But it does seem to me that they just wish to dip in and out when it suits.
Okay, Julia, did you just want to answer
Yes,
that?
I do, Jack. I just want to answer that because I'm one of only 4 councillors out of 74 councillors that have children of school age. My son is autistic and has special needs. I could not attend that meeting, and I was told by an officer that I would not receive the slides after the meeting because I failed to attend. I queried that with the Chief Executive, and he forwarded the slides to me and understood that I should not be penalised for not attending a meeting during the school holidays. I had this conversation with the leader on numerous occasions, and I was delighted when for the first time we moved our annual budget out of the half-term holiday, and I congratulated her on modernising the authority. Is this a council only for retired people, or do you want working age people around the table?
Okay, that's enough. That's enough.
Why couldn't you?
That is enough. Can you just all be quiet, please? This is not the time or the place to be having these kinds of conversations, Julia.
Absolutely not.
Julia, William, enough. There may be opportunities for you to join online or whatever, but you need to sort that out outside of this meeting. Okay, right. So I'm going to move to the recommendations now. I'm not going to go over the recommendations that are written down there. What I do want to say is though a few thank yous, because I think it's involved an extraordinary amount of work for James's team and Ben J and Gwilym. They've worked really, really hard so that you can get these figures quite early. I really appreciate having Andy here and Tanya here, because I think it's important, and I think scrutiny is being taken seriously and we can have some real input into what's going on. So that's really, really good. So thank you very much. And then if you're still there, I do understand we asked you a lot of challenging questions. And I think probably the place for all the detailed answers is at the task and finish groups, you know, where you can come and we can have, you know, we can have far more detail. Okay, so what I'd like to recommend is actually that this committee is setting up 3 task and finish groups, and that the one task and finish group is actually specifically focused on one is focused specifically on the discharge and around adult social care, and the other is focused on children's services element of it. And that is where I think this committee should be focused. When we have the task and finish groups, I spoke to Roger earlier in the week. What he suggested was that the membership of the task and finish groups, people should be nominated by the group leader. I accepted that suggestion. I think that's a good idea. What I would say, what I always say, is that when we have the task and finish groups, every single member is welcome to come along and have some input into those task and finish groups, because they are very valuable, and it does give us an opportunity to have an in-depth look into those 2 areas, because the reality is the budget pressures are all around adults and children's. So if you're okay with that, I shall move that from the chair. Do you have anything to say, Roger? It's pretty much what you said anyway.
I was going to second it, strangely.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, and also the third one is to look at task and finish with finance on.
Yeah, it is, and it's about surrounding the capital strategy. And I was actually surprised that there weren't any questions on capital strategy.
Well, I did have some, Chair, but it wasn't listed, and it's very small print at the back of this report. But yeah, the strategy. I may have some comments to make next week at the cabinet, later this week at the cabinet. But yeah, and the task and finish group to look at that, because there are important points in it that we need to look at.
I had a couple of points, but I'm not going to give them you now. Right, okay, so I propose, Roger seconded. Is everyone okay with that? Yeah. So what I'm now going to propose is that we have a 5-minute break for people to put their heads underneath the cold water tap, because it is really hot in here, and get a drink. So if we just rush to the loo, get a drink and come back, because it is very hot. Have we got any fans?
There are some.
Roger. So moving on to item number 7, which is the performance monitoring report. Although it's under James's name, this report was done by Helen.
It was.
So, and can I just say that Roger and I have had a couple of meetings with Helen, and we will continue to have meetings with Helen. I think she's done a great job in putting all this together. And there is more detail. Hopefully you've followed the link to the Shropshire Plan page to see the other bits of it. So it's work in progress really, but at least we've got it started, and we want to build on what we've got. So thank you very much indeed, Helen, for all your hard work. And I know it's not everything that we want as a committee, but we are moving in the right direction. So James, do you want to present it, or do you want Helen, or
Well,
you start and then
if I just give a brief introduction.
brief introduction then? Okay.
Helen's going to try and get the hold up on the
Yeah.
be able to see that, but we'll see how that goes. So yeah, in terms of the report, this is the first quarter for the performance monitor. It's the first time that we've produced it in line with the new the existing Shropshire Plan. I can't call it new; it's been around for over 12 months now. As you said, Chair, what we've looked at is to try and pull together a series of indicators, an entire performance management framework, which fits around delivering the outcomes of the Shropshire Plan. So there are a group of indicators that we've identified there. We've identified how they fit within the priorities of the council. So healthy organisation, healthy people, healthy economy and healthy environment. Within the Shropshire Plan, under those priorities, it indicates the strategic objectives, and there's about 20 of these strategic objectives that have been identified. What we try to do is to demonstrate how the performance indicators link towards those strategic objectives, and we've also identified which portfolio holders have responsibility for those performance indicators. By doing all of that, we're hoping to get an overarching view of whether we are online to deliver the Shropshire Plan. And given the conversation that you had earlier around the budget position, obviously there's a very tight link there between what we're delivering in terms of spending reductions at the same time as delivering the outcomes that we're intending to deliver for the Shropshire Plan. They're not mutually exclusive. We can take the money away, we can reduce spending or change the way that we're doing things and still deliver outcomes as they are, maintain that, or even improve those in certain circumstances. It was also the event where members were able to feed in terms of which of the indicators that members are particularly concerned about or want to see within that framework. All of this is a work in progress. Not all of the information is there at the moment. The plan is to get more and more information onto the portal. As that information then develops, targets will be going on to that, tolerances within that, as well as the actual performance information. As that develops, it will give a much more rounded view of the performance of the organisation, and as I say, in terms of are we actually delivering the outcomes identified through those outcomes that are within the Shropshire Plan. So I can see Helen's now got it up on screen, so I'll stop talking and hand over to Helen, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yes, that's fine.
We might move forward. So as James said, we've relaunched the approach to the key performance indicators, and this is starting with the Shropshire Plan. So this is the top level. So if you think of it as a triangle, this is that overall, how are we progressing against the Shropshire Plan? Beneath this top level, there is going to be a series of other more detailed key performance indicators that we'll be working with, and we already started that work across all directorates to start to look at that more detailed activity that then drives that top and overall view. And this is really your window in to see how that overall performance is working, and through the task and finish groups, if there's more detail or more scrutiny required, that's where we will provide additional information, working with various task and finish groups and and service leads to provide that information for further discussion. So this is the launch of the new look and feel. We're using, and just sort of echoing back to the earlier conversation about transformational work, this is transformational work around data and business intelligence. So previously we had a product called InPhase. We've now ceased that license because we've developed this in-house. So just to blow another trumpet there, we've made a saving by doing it this way. The idea is that this is going to be kept up to date, as James has already mentioned. We've been that very different approach. We've worked pre-Christmas with yourselves to identify some of your top priorities. We've been working with directors, assistant directors to identify those key performance indicators that are going to demonstrate the delivery of the plan. But alongside that, the key bit is we've identified targets, we've identified owners, so there's portfolio holder owners against each KPI, there's an executive director owner against each KPI, and an assistant director. And when we go into the report, which hopefully you've all had a look at already, we're providing trend information in there and, more importantly, benchmarking information there as well. Due to the size of the task, we haven't got everything in that's laid out for the key performance indicator, but by Q2, the plan is to have everything within the report. Here. So at the top level, you'll have a summary across each of the healthies, which indicators are in there, so how many KPIs there are and which of the strategic objectives they link to. And you can see here they're all RAG rated, so you can see how many are green, red, amber. And then for each of those healthies, you can go into, so I'm squiggling that amount. So within each of the healthies, you can go into more detail. So then you're starting to get down to the level of each of the KPIs that's being set. That's the overall top level view again. So you can see the trend information, whether it's on target. And then there's two ways you can then look at the detail. You can either hover over the indicator and it brings you up that information. It's not showing very well on the screen. Or cursor again. Okay,
so can I ask you a question while you're hovering?
That way. Thank you. Yes.
Hello. Yeah, so in the original report, page 9, the indicator HP34, it's about digital technology for adult social care. Is that actually represented on the website, or have you not fished that out yet? Just wondered if it was on there, because you were looking at healthy people. Is it on there yet?
I can't remember every single one that's gone in.
No, it's all right.
Been a bit of a moving feast with some of this. No, so that one's not in there yet.
No, okay. So it's quite interesting, and actually Helen has picked up on some of the work that we've been doing and some of the work we will do. So I think actually the HP34 digital technology one, it is one that went to the people committee, didn't it, Tanya?
Yeah.
It's something that they are going to look into. So it will actually feed into the task and finish group. So hopefully at some stage, I don't know how much technology is out there, but at some stage it will feed in and we'll be able to look, which would be quite helpful. And there's another one as well, which was on page 10, HP37, mental health presentations at hospital. I presume that's not on the indicators either, is it?
We'll be going through all the public health ones next.
No. Because I think in amongst all this, and obviously we're just starting, the building blocks there, especially those ones around the work we're doing, there could be, presentations at hospital or discharge, ready for discharge, those kind of pieces of work that will come out the task and finish group. Hopefully we can feed them through to you and we can get some data that actually relates to what we're doing, which would be really, really, really good. So, yeah, I just thought I'd mention that. Thank you, Helen.
So I guess this is the key information. So you'll see there, it's, you know, as you said, we've indicated who's responsible, accountable, and the portfolio holder, the frequency of which that measure will be updated, what the ambition is for that measure, and the strategic objective, and then it's the commentary and the narrative that's the key piece there. So there's the rationale that sits behind why we're looking at that measure. Then the comments. We are working with service areas to provide those comments, so we will be reviewing on a regular basis where we are with the key performance indicators. That's commentary coming from the service areas. And then should that measure be going off target, that's where we'll have the discussions on actions required. So it's understanding where we are, and if there is mitigation or actions needed, then you'll be able to see that in the action required as well. So that you've got your trend information there, and at the bottom here, this is benchmarking against our statistical neighbours in a table, and just as a bar graph is a slightly different visual.
Sorry, which one's that, and which one are we looking at against our statistical neighbours? Which one's that?
Sorry, what do you mean?
HB19.
HB19.
Yeah,
What's that?
Stability of placements of looked after children.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I think one of the things that we probably want going forward is that you know, there are comparables for a lot of these things, because I think it's important we measure ourselves against other people, and you know, and also some of them, I suppose, some of these comparables are split again across directorates as well, aren't they? That makes it a bit fuzzy sometimes, doesn't it? But I think as we move forward, we'll be able to break it down and get some really valuable information.
Yeah, and I think this is, you say, it's work in progress as we move forward. Yes, we'll be able to get down to that in more detail. And what, again, one of the things that we've tried to indicate on these is where some of the measures we own and we have a direct ability to control that KPI. There are others that are more system-wide where we influence them. So once we've got strong influence, we're not necessarily in overall ownership of that, and that's where again that starts to look at that wider system. So if you know a measure's going off track, is it down to our work or is it the wider system, and therefore can we bring further discussion in and sort of put more pressure around that, particularly thinking like, you know, hospital discharges, for instance, that side of things, really, you know.
And I think it's when you start to have the performance data, you can see other things from it, other things, indications of why things are happening a particular way, or things to look into. So the insight that you get from performance data will be really, really helpful, I think. And also that some of the data I would like to see as live data. You know, and I don't see why moving forward we can't have live data up on there.
Yeah, and again, that's dependent on the measure and the data. Yes, some we will be able to get more live, more real time, particularly when you get into service data and activity data. Some of the performance indicators, because of the way they're measured, that they will be more on either a monthly basis, termly basis for some of the education ones, some are quarterly, some are annually. So it will be a bit of a mixed bag in terms of the Shropshire plan level, but I think when you get into more task and finished group level KPIs, yes, we'll be in a stronger position to give that more real-time data.
Okay, Councillor Bentinck's got his hand up. He wants to ask you a question. There you go.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate all of the hard work that has gone into producing these KPIs, and I'd just like to restrict my questions with regard to the health ones. So the first one is the numbers go up to HP 37, but there are only 21 actual KPIs that are on the list. So where are the others? Second is, have councillors had an input into these KPIs, particularly those who may have health backgrounds? Not mentioning any names. Then moving on to specifics. Why are the specific targets for most of these health KPIs within 1% of the existing position for as demonstrated on the detailed slides which show benchmarking and targets? Why are there no KPIs for deaths following urgent admission and assessment of patients, including A&E departments, which is a vital figure and which has hit the national news as well as local news with regard to unnecessary deaths and the level of services that are provided? And a related topic is, why are there no KPIs for West Midlands Ambulance Service? And why are there no KPIs for medical examiner review of deaths after acute admissions, which are vital statistics that I believe this council should be looking at?
Okay, I'm going to stop you. Yeah, okay, I was going to stop you there anyway. So a couple of things really. The team have worked really hard, but of course some of this information has to come from the ICB or ICS, whatever they choose to call themselves now, and that in itself is difficult, should we say, a work in progress. So a lot of the information you're asking for is actually down to the ICS, not down to us. The other thing is as well, I don't know if you have group meetings, but certainly Roger and I have had regular meetings with Helen, and we have discussed what we'd like to bring forward. So I don't know if there was anything else in there that is. The only other thing was as well, which was the point I raised at the beginning of the meeting. So there's more measures in the report than there are on the website, and that's the point I highlighted at the beginning. Perhaps you missed that. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want specifically covering. In fact, I think I'll perhaps Tanya, have I missed anything or?
I'm just sitting here thinking that some of those measures, councillor, should be raised at the Health and Wellbeing Board. And we've talked about this, haven't we, in the Health and Scrutiny Committee about performance measures and how we can have better knowledge about the health of the system. I guess these measures are very much about the Shropshire plan, aren't they? So I'm just wondering, Helen, if we can perhaps do a piece of work with the Health and Wellbeing Board around some system-wide metrics that absolutely talk to the measures that Councillor is raising.
Thank you, Tanya.
I
think the important thing is that some of these vital measures are not missed. The ICB may not voluntarily give some of the information which is of crucial importance for various reasons, and of course in the past haven't given that information. And so I would just like to ask that these vital pieces of information are gathered. And this is an overview of the other scrutiny processes within the council. And so I think it should be mentioned at this level, so that they can be cascaded down to the other scrutiny processes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So have we got Julia? There you go.
So thank you. I really appreciate the system that's been set up, and I tested it earlier and sent some feedback with a question. But when we received the report, it was not live. So the idea is of scrutiny meetings that members receive information the week before, and I read the reports the week before, even though it was the school holidays. But when I clicked through, it was not yet live. So then I believe it came online on the 30th of August.
Tuesday.
31st.
So that was a little bit frustrating because there's quite a lot of detail that we could have spent more time looking at before today. And as you appreciate, this will now be discussed again on Wednesday at Cabinet, but at least we'll have had that time. But what is great is the level of detail that's in there. And the question that I put on the feedback is why so first of all, it says there's 36 KPIs, but I could only find 33, so I don't know what the missing 3 are. But also, some of them don't have a target. And so exception reports come to this committee because it's RAG rated based on by how much it is meeting or failing a target. And I assume it's done on a 10% margin. It doesn't explain what the threshold for that is, because I'm worried that it's different. It should be different for some KPIs. It worries me that they're not all the same threshold. So how can we rag rate a KPI that doesn't have a target, because effectively it's being monitored, but there's no analysis of whether it's above or below.
Yeah, I'll bring Steve Taylor in a minute to answer that in a bit more detail, but some of the data is baseline data, and it's from last year, so we didn't want to put last year's target in, but going forwards they will start to be built in, and that will start to build up. So yeah, rather than not putting them in because they were baseline, we wanted to include them. I'd hummed and hard about it and said, we'll take them out, so we'll leave them in. And then in terms of the tolerances, yes, they will be different. And as we work through that and you know, get those fixed, we'll probably a good idea to show what the different tolerances are, because yes, you're right. I mean, a tolerance, you know, in finance, you know, the 5% tolerance in finance would be horrific if you went one way or the other. But in another area that might be acceptable. So yes, there will be different tolerances around that, and yeah, that would drive the rag rate too.
I'm going to give 2 examples then that concerned me. So there was around the roads in need of repair, both principal roads and non-principal roads. There's no target for those, and they're very low percentages, but they're both increasing quite significantly. So that's obviously a worry, isn't it, that there is no target, so it won't be rag rated, but they're on the up, and we know that our budget is under pressure. So that's one example. And the other example of the threshold issue is the first choice of secondary schools. Now, we all know it's been an exceptional cohort this year. It's a nationwide issue, isn't it, to do with a birth rate blip, but we also all experience in all of our divisions some families who did not get their first choice of school. Some of them didn't get their second choice, as you know, and that has led to some quite long journeys for 11-year-olds starting this week to get to a secondary school quite some distance from their home, and it's put pressure on school transport. Now, at the moment, the target is 82.4%, and this year we've achieved 89%, which sounds excellent. But for those families involved, it absolutely is the opposite of excellent. It is absolutely a nightmare scenario. And I spoke to families 2 weeks ago who still hadn't had confirmation as to whether or not they had transport to school. So they've now got a child, an 11-year-old, about to start a secondary school, some 4 miles from where they live, parents working shifts at the hospital, so frontline workers, and they still don't know how their kids are going to get to school. Now, that's, you know, I'm talking about exceptional cases, but we know that has happened across the piece. So what we're hearing is that we're doing better than the target, but it doesn't actually tell the full story, because even it's only affecting a few people, and it's certainly tens of people, isn't it, getting towards hundreds, that still has a major impact on those particular families. So I think we also need some measure of that, don't we? Some kind of impact measure on those families.
So I know some of the people in my division have been affected in that way. In fairness, Julia, I think Helen is not the right person.
No, it's just an example.
And this is not the right place. It is a good example, but actually it should probably sit somewhere within scrutiny. And I have to say as well that Rob, who's the portfolio holder, has been doing an excellent job and a lot of work and trying to push this forward. So I think it's kind of work in progress. And he struggled to get this up and live with Helen. So it's work in progress, but I think the important thing with it is that we keep talking and we try to keep moving forward. And also conversations like this are great because it feeds into what we want put on there.
Can I just add, I think this was the dilemma with these performance measures of when do you hit the button, what do you hit the button with?
Yes.
And we just got to the point of taking that decision of let's launch with something. Let's make sure that the ones you're seeing that there is that information behind it. They're going to get refined further as we go along, and over time it will probably change as to what are the key performance bits for delivering the Shropshire plans. So it is a case of just keep feeding back in. If there's more ideas, if there's refinements, if part of this doesn't look right, let us know. But for us, it's also about concentrating on those that really are the key ones at this point. Let's get those up and running if we can, and then, as we say, there'll be more and more detail that comes. And as you say, that might come through the scrutiny work you're doing, and suddenly there's an identification of there's something else needed in there. But I think in terms of getting something up and running, people can see it, it's live, it's public. We can get feedback as well from the public about it and how useful it is for them. I think it's a good first. Let's go with that.
Yeah, Tom, you want to do?
It was more just to sort of, this is the first meeting where you've had the new finance report and the new performance reporting. From the statutory scrutiny officer perspective, the focus is always going to be on how scrutiny is adding value, what you're going to do. So going forwards, you're getting both reports at the same time. If you start looking at the financial information alongside the performance information, are you seeing patterns, trends, things to drill into and ask questions on? If there's things you're interested in getting more information on, exactly as Councillor Mason just said, what are the additional bits of information you want to look at? If there's something around the financial reporting that maybe needs a little bit more nuancing or needs to be picked up in the task to finish group to be looked at alongside the performance data, then this is that chance to make sure that this is being shaped. And I think very much making sure that you as members of this committee and members of the other committees are owning what's here and what you're seeing as well. So yeah, real opportunity to just keep building this on going forwards.
Okay, so have you finished, Julia? Roger's, yeah, okay, Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulate your work, and it is good to see more there, and it's answering some of the information. But this information is based around the Shropshire plan.
Yep.
There is also more information that members may wish, because we're being asked questions out by our residents, and how do we get those to feed into this as a performance indicator? For example, ones that came to my mind is the planning enforcement, the numbers of issued, the length of time that they've been out, complements, number of emergency road closures, how many are they going on, street repairs, number of permits issued, the number of fines that are made, for example. And there's DFG's Disabled Facilities Grants, which I used to chase through along to some time ago. But it's that sort of information which I think members are by their parishes, by residents, what is happening. And it would be good sometime to have a performance indicator or something. And there is more work, and I understand the mountain that we are attempting to climb, but where do and how do scrutiny committees or members feed them in, maybe via the scrutiny committees, as a way of not just one member taking up an issue, it's via the scrutiny committees, but how do we highlight what performance measures that we would like? There's 4 scrutiny committees, maybe take it to each of them and ask them to actually list and take it forward.
I don't disagree with that, Roger. I mean, what I would say is though that you're a long-serving councillor, you get out and about quite a lot, so you have a definite feel about what people want to know, and certainly that's really helpful. In the next meeting we have with Helen and Tom, Rob's very kindly offered if he's available to come along as well. So I think what I would suggest is that after the next meeting, where we've sort of talked about things, put some more measures on there, and then we ask the scrutiny committees. So I think we need more stuff up there before we go to the scrutiny committees, really. That's my gut feeling. What do you think, Rob? I don't think we've got enough up there yet, because if we don't get the sort of skeleton of it all up first, then we're going to get dragged down by the minutiae. And so we need to get that up first. But
if I can, Chairman, I understand that, because the Cabinet and senior officers need the performance to see how the council is doing. And what we as members are a little bit more, as you say, minutiae, it's to answer those questions. So it is a horse and cart.
Yeah, and I think hopefully, I mean, we're very lucky because so we've got one Rob there, who's going to ask a question in a minute, and another Rob here. Both of them are very good on IT and everything. So it's great that we've got that, because we've got the people there to actually help us achieve what we want to achieve.
I suppose that would be my point. Is I've got no issue if we want to try and agree a mechanism of
to do
it
it
added and so on. I think some of the stuff you're talking to, when it comes to the minutiae, the detail, that's part of the bigger transformation picture of these services. Got to have systems in place to report some of this in a way that then can come across to Helen, that then can be linked into these dashboards and so on. And that's why these are the sort of the starting point, because some of the bigger picture stuff is there, some of the bigger stats are available. And I think as it works further and further down, that's where you'll see the overall transformation on the digital and the services side, so they can give that extra information.
Yeah, so I think once we get to a certain point, things will start to move. You know, it's a bit like a blocked drain, sort of going at it, and then suddenly it goes. And I think once we get into all the directors into a way of system working where they know they have to do all these things, suddenly it all come together.
I mean, the one other point is they don't all have to appear on this dashboard. This is the Shropshire Plan dashboard. It could well be that over time it evolves into, there needs to be a different dashboard that picks up the minutiae and the other bits for an area or something like that. That once it's all linked in and all the systems talk to each other and people know what they're collecting and so on, I think this is just that first bit to unlocking all the information that's there.
And there will be some that will be confidential, so it'll just be for members, I would imagine. Rob,
yes, thank you very much, Chair.
Welcome your input.
Okay, thank you. It was just a couple of questions, really. One was, why haven't all the KPIs come across from the old system? So I can point one out. The connecting Shropshire stuff, for example, was on the old system under healthy economy, and I'm looking for it now and I can't seem to find it. So I would have thought it was sort of quite straightforward just to bring that across. So that was one question. The second question I had was sort of around sort of cost pressures and budgets. Really, should there not perhaps be a line under each directorate, for example, around cost pressures, because at the moment it's all just focused in underneath resources under one line, and it would probably be good to see maybe a breakdown, for example, in adult social care and children's services, for example, how adult social care and children's services are getting on at closing the gap, should one say. So maybe that's just an idea I was throwing out, really.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okie dokie. Right, well, I'm very conscious of time. Everyone's been very patient. So are there any more comments? Because I'm just going to note this report, I think, and say thank you very much. And I look forward to meeting up with Helen and Rob and Tom in the next month or so and going to the next level. And we will come back and tell you what progress has been made at the next meeting. I think that's fair enough. We'll just give a little brief update. If that's okay. Are you happy with that, Roger?
Yeah.
Julia, are you okay?
I'm just not sure. So I raised some questions about a couple of the indicators, and it does say in the report that this is the moment for us to identify any issues for further scrutiny. So is it now or never?
Well, no. If you email us what you'd like, Rob, Roger, myself, and Helen we'll look at that the next time we go through everything. Or if you want it officially noted, I don't have a problem with that either. Sorry, is that Steve? Did you want to say something, Steve?
In terms of...
You got your button on, but you're on mute.
No, shouldn't be.
I know, you're all right now. I can hear you now. Oh. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I can answer some of the questions if you want me to do now, or you can if you want to take them as separately and publish them. That's up to you.
Do you want some answers to your questions, Julia, now, Steve, sir? Yeah?
It was more about the report seemed to be asking us to identify issues to look at the next meeting, and so I was making sure that we were taking that opportunity because we raised certain things.
Yeah.
They be the ones that we look at the next meeting. So it's come from the members of this committee.
Okay, so have you got all those noted down, Tom?
Some of them.
Some of them. Do you want to read them? Has Roger got them all? Or?
No, it's recorded anyway, Chairman.
Oh, it's recorded anyway.
During the meeting, officer can have
Okay.
a look at the recording to do it then, because it's all their memories and what we actually said. It's
Right,
there.
okay. So are you content with that, Julia? Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, okay then, so if everyone's happy, we will move on to the work programme. So what Tom's done is we've got 3 task and finish groups lined up. Thank you very much indeed, and Kirsty and Cecilia and Rob.
Let me know if there's any more.
Yeah, I will. We've got, are you able to put those up? So the a brief summary of the 3 task and finish groups we're going to run. I don't know if you want to just look at this, yeah, it might be helpful. Yeah. Are you still with us, Ben? Yeah, hopefully. Thanks very much, Helen. So who've we got? Oh, oh, yeah, Ben's still there. Good. Okay. So do you want to put? Can you load those up or onto the? Yeah, no thing.
It's going to let me on. Come to my machine.
Right. Okay. Do you want to load it up then? Yeah. Do you want to? I don't know who's loading stuff on. Is it Tim or Ben or who's the other person?
I can do. I'm in the meeting, so.
Yeah. Do you want to give it to Tim so if he can do it? Or Steve? I don't know. Steve's gone.
Steve's gone. Yeah.
Yeah. Who is that other person?
It's just the live stream.
Oh, yeah, that's a live stream. And I think it's just important we have a quick look at these and then people can, Julia and Roger are here and Julian, so that's good. So they can just see what's done.
Wait till it's in then.
Right then, if you get them loaded up, and then we can just have a quick look. Thanks very much, Rob. Okay, so have you got it, Tim? Can you load it up? Julian, are you group leader now? Yeah. I thought you were, I was just checking. Right, okay.
Do you want to go to the next slide, Tim?
Yeah.
So, as Chair said, we've got 3 task and finish groups. So the first one we'll look at very quickly here is the capital strategy and the budget task and finish group. So we could have taken these as 2 separate task and finish groups, but it made sense to have the same group of members doing both the capital strategy and then moving into the medium-term financial strategy come budget piece. So these are largely based on what was agreed in your work programme, but have been tweaked based on the feedback and comments that we made at the last meeting. So in terms of the capital strategy, you can see on that as well that there's an opportunity to look at the capital strategy and alternative budgets through that work, and that will roll into the work of the medium-term financial strategy and next year's budget, which is why it's key to make sure I think that they're brought together.
So just to be clear on that, Are you going to be talking about adults and children's services within that task and finish group?
So it will be, it'll be across the piece. So anything on this part of it, anything that's related to the capital strategy, that also covers adults and children specifically, which is raised, yes, it would be. It would be everything there.
So that's okay, because it wasn't very clear. Okay,
so, yeah,
that's all right.
Yeah,
Sorry.
it's global. So
right,
as a task and finish group, you'll do what you would normally do, which is you'll specify and drill down into the areas that you want to explore. We'll go to the next one, Tim.
Through you, Chairman, is there a page 2? Ah.
Yeah.
It's almost as if you don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the second part. So this is medium-term financial strategy and budget elements. So this is the second part of the work for this task and finish group. The capital strategy piece we would look to bring back to this committee in November, so that it hits the capital sort of budget setting process and can inform what's going to take place into December. We'd start this next phase probably before November, but we'll roll through into the new year as we've done to do with your financial strategy task and finish group work. And again, I won't rehearse what's in there. There should be no surprises, but it's very much sort of getting to understanding across the piece what's happening. And you will undoubtedly want to explore specific areas of the task and finish group. And I think you all alluded to it earlier in your conversations around the finances, with the chair focusing as well. You might take a risk-based approach and look at where we've got the greatest financial risks and other risks to the authority. You might want to look at those as you're doing it. But I don't want to preclude what the task and finish group will set for themselves in there. Tim, do you want to get to the next one?
Yep. Go on, Roger.
Can I come back on that?
Yeah, go back one.
Yeah, November 23 start. I want to look at this year's budget as well as it progresses. Q2 will come out when? September? Sorry, we're in September now. When does Q2? November.
Yeah,
but also have a look at the Q1 budget, how it's progressing. A number of questions came up today at it, and I would have wanted to progress those to understand where we were, to actually build on for next year, maybe, but to understand it now. And as I said, when I was talking about global rather than all the way through. It's just, when is that going to be discussed?
So sorry, picking up on what Roger said. So I would have thought. So we have talked previously about partnership working, about the relationship with the ICS and discharge and all the performance stuff. But that's not in there. That's in a different one. So surely it would make sense if we're talking about adults and children that it's in the same one as the hospital one. I don't know.
So when it comes to these task and finish groups, it's going to be you as the members, which
yes,
sort of
because I thought really the capital strategy should perhaps sit on its own a bit. I don't know, and the budget and the partnership working, which is where all the money is, should be in one.
Okay, that's. Yeah.
What do you think, Roger? I mean, yeah, I think that's more sensible.
I think that does. Capital is a little bit different. It does have repercussions onto the revenue, but the capital, I think, is where we have capital investing. Need to look at it, and it should not be subsidiary to the revenue, but the revenue one is going to take over if we're not careful.
Yeah, and actually, I think the capital strategy is it'll be quite a lightweight task and finish group. I'd have thought it would have been a day's jobby. I don't know. Okay, so if you move on to the next one, and then we can have a look.
Just before you do that one, I was only going to say, second bullet down on that looks at identifying the learning from the previous year's budgets. So I think hopefully, and I've got that written down here, and I've gone through the SIPFA and Centre for Governance and Scrutiny guidance as well. You absolutely should be, as you do your budget scrutiny through the year, learning from the previous years and see how that's been translated into the coming year. So, Roger, you were absolutely correct on that, and that has got to be part of the work of the task and finish group, looking at the finances, the financial strategy and the budget. Sorry, Tim, on to the last one. Okay, so this is the last one. Second to the last one. This is the cost of benefits of system working. So what I will do is I will just move I would make that into the combined task to finish with the budget one.
Yeah.
So you'll start on that one with this earlier in the autumn and roll into the other piece then as well as you go through the year. So
Yeah.
that fits.
Separate out, and then the third one is what?
Transformation.
Yeah. So the transformation. So that's so is that where the children's stuff will be in there?
I think what you'll get is
children and adults.
Yeah, you'll get children and adults in the other budget one as well. But this is where you're focusing very much on, very much replicated. I think the conversation that you were having when you're talking about transformation within the budget paper or the financial paper conversation, which is, and the reason we've landed it in December is having had conversations with Billy Webster, the AD, who's responsible for the transformation programme. At that point, he feels that you'll have more task to get into and work with and have that view going forwards. It sits well, I think, with the work that you've been doing around the budget and having looked at the system working as well around adults. So it will have adults and children within that. They're the main focus in there, but you might want to pick up on some of the customer focus elements as well that I think James touched on earlier in the meeting too. So changing how we use systems and technology in the way that
so technology goes in there. So what I'd say is that some of the stuff from the middle one, the budget stuff, some of the things that comes out of that with adults and children should then actually be rolled forward into the transformation, so that we can, move it forward. Because otherwise it's going nowhere. So we wrap that up and then move it on to the next bit. Yeah. Okay. So Tom will send out the terms of reference and everything to the group leaders, and you'll jiggle it about as we've suggested and then send it out. Okay. Everyone. And so, the ambulance one worked really well, which is why I'm glad Julian's here, and Julia did that one. But if you wanted it, whoever, it's up to you. But certainly Kate Halliday was brilliant, so it's up to you as the group leaders. But certainly I think we did a pretty good job last time. Right, okie dokie then. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your forbearance. Thank you very much, Andy, for coming. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Tim. I think we can sign off.